Today we're going to go over how do you convert between different quadratic forms, whether it's factored form, vertex form, or standard form, and you want to go from one to the other. It's possible. So you already have all the actual skills to get you to do that. This table just kind of lays it out on how to do that. So if you're in factored form and you want to go to standard form, all you have to do is multiply the two sets in the factors, the two factors, using your box. And if you have your a value on the outside, if it's not 1, distribute. If you want to go from vertex to standard form, you start off with that x minus h squared. Remember, that means two of the same thing, so you multiply just like in the previous one. You also distribute the a, but remember you have that extra little number on the outside. You got to add it in or subtract it in. And then we have our next method, which is standard to factored. You just factor. That's pretty much it. Do the x factor, use your shortcut or grouping. And then there's our last one, which is standard to vertex. I would say this is the one that will require the most work just because you have to make sure you complete the square. And it's just going back to that skill, dividing by 2 and halving it. But we'll go over an example of each of these cases. Now, you may be asking, like, why isn't there a chart for going from factor to vertex? So if you want to go like from factor to vertex form, you would first do this, factor to standard, and then standard to vertex. So I didn't want to write it twice. So that's the general idea. So let's go ahead and see some examples. All right, so let's look at number 1. We're going to convert to standard form. This is currently in factored form. So all we need to do is just multiply the 2 or the 3 factors to each other. So let's start with the binomials. I'm just going to do my box. We've multiplied many times. This should be second nature at this point. X plus 7 and x minus 2. So we're just going to go ahead and multiply these guys. We get x squared minus 2x, 7x, and negative 14. Then we just go ahead and combine like terms. In this case, it's going to be these guys right here. So let's write that out. So I'm going to go back to my problem here. It's going to be f of x. Let's actually change that pen. F of x, same thing as y, remember. Equals 5. And then these two became whatever this box gives me. So it's x squared as my first term. 7 minus 2 is positive 5x. And then we have our 14, that's negative. So we have our factor from multiplying the 2 binomials. Now I have to distribute is the 5, and I'm done. So when I multiply 5 times x squared, just because of space, I'm going to write at the bottom just to write it bigger. So final answer would be f of x equals 5 times x squared. So when I distribute 5x squared, 5 times 5 is going to give me positive 25. And 5 times 14, that's going to be negative 70, I'm sorry. And I just converted from factored form to standard form. Just multiply and distribute. So that's a pretty easy one. 2 skills that you guys definitely have down by this point. Let's go ahead and move on to number 2. So we were going to convert from standard form, from vertex form to standard form. So again, it's just multiply everything out. So I'm going to start with a box. So I'm going to start with this section right here, the x minus 2 squared. So I'm going to draw my box here. So we have this box. Remember, x minus 2 squared means there's 2 x minus 2's. And we're just going to go ahead and multiply as usual. Nothing new from our regular multiplications. So this will be x squared minus 2x minus 2x again, and positive 4. So we're going to write that out. So f of x, we have our negative 3. I'm actually going to write it lower so I can make it bigger. let's write this again. F of x, we have -3. We have the big parenthesis plus the 7 at the end. Don't forget the 7, that's very important. So we have x squared minus 4x plus 4. Remember, we combine the two x's that are both negative. So these were combined to get that -4x in the middle. Now we're going to go ahead and do the distributive property, just like in the previous one, -3x squared plus 12x minus 12 plus 7. Because we have this extra 7, it takes us an extra step to finish it off, because we have to combine -3x squared plus 12x, and that's going to give us -5. So we just went from standard form to, from vertex form to standard form. So to go to standard form, looking at both of these examples, it's really not that crazy difficult. So let's go ahead and look at examples 3 and 4. Now we're going to convert to factored form. This is in standard form. So now we're going to go backward. So we need to do our x factor. Notice we cannot use our shortcut because of that 3, so we have to do grouping unless we take out the GCF, and in this case we can take out a GCF conveniently. So let's go ahead and do that. So I'm going to do f of x. I notice all of these divide by -3, so I'm going to take out a -3 from here. So when I divide the first one by -3, I get x squared. Divide by -3, we're going to get positive 4x. Divide by -3, we get -12. I'm going to do my x factor for that middle section inside the parentheses only. So I'm going to do my x factor, -12 and 4. I'm going to be able to use a shortcut because now I have a 1 there. So what two numbers multiply to 12 and combine to 4? 6 times 2, where the negative is the 2. So I'm going to go ahead now and use this to write my factored form. So f of x is equal to -3. I'm going to be able to use the shortcut, so x plus 6 and x minus 2. If I couldn't factor using the shortcut, I would have to do grouping, but most examples usually work nicely. All right, let's go ahead and go to our last example where we're going to convert to vertex form from standard form. This is the one that's going to be the one we have to go back and dig in our brains to remember how to do how to do completing the square. All right, so let's go ahead and start by completing the square. So remember, vertex form looks like this. So we have our a value, right here on the side. We have our a value. We have x minus h squared plus our k value. So we need to be able to have our a value out, that 4. So we have to factor it out and then put it in put something in parentheses. So to be very careful, we're going to start, I'm not going to write the f for now. I'm going to divide everything by 4. So I'm going to start off with just these two, because these two are going to make up this section right here. This last one's going to make up the k. So I'm going to factor out a 4 from both of these. So I'm going to do 4. And then I'm going to have x squared. And then it's going to be plus 10 x. And I'm going to have my 106 here. I don't worry about factoring this 4 for this one because that's going to be my part of my k. All right, now I'm going to go ahead and put the space to complete the square because I need to pick my own c value. That's going to allow me to factor this as a perfect square. Now, the problem here is if I add that blank there, I need to add it to the other side of the equation. But in this case, I'm not going to add it to the other side of the equation because I have my f of x. I'm just going to subtract it onto the same side. So I'm going to, instead of